Hello, and welcome to another tutorial from CamiPaige Boutique. I'm Brooke Tannehill, and today I'm going to show you how I created a peacock feather tumbler that uses a vinyl technique inspired by the extremely talented Vanessa Davis of VMD Designs. If you haven't seen her stuff, I linked her channel below so you could check it out for yourself. Growing up, my sister was always obsessed with peacock feathers and their vibrant colors, so naturally, I didn't like them, but I grew to appreciate their beauty as I got older. So Lindsay, this one's for you. As always, all the products I use will be listed in the description below, and you may even find a coupon code or two that saves you some coin. Also, come join our exclusive Facebook group where you can take advantage of upcoming freebies and giveaways that you aren't going to want to miss. So without further hesitation, let's go ahead and get started. For this design, I started with a 30-ounce straight skinny from Parish Tumblers, prepped it, and then spray painted it with 4 of the coordinating colors with the glitters we will be using. I'll list the spray paint colors below, but that way you can follow along. But literally all we're doing with the spray paints is just laying a nice base for our 4-color ombre that we'll be putting on this cup. For the ombre, I will be using the epoxy method, so I apply about 2 milliliters of a little extra ink epoxy, make sure I've got a nice smooth coat, and then I move in to applying my glitters for the 4-color ombre. Now, I'm not going to lie, when you're blending this many colors, you are going to get an arm workout, so just prepare yourself. But I grabbed e.l.f. from Boujie Glitter Boutique, and I'm holding the cup downward at a 45-degree angle and lightly sprinkling the green to begin our color ombre or the blending that we'll be doing. And I am just starting at the top rim, and what you can see is I am barely sprinkling out any glitter, because this first pass of putting glitters on the cup, you are just kind of laying down the groundwork. You are by no means stuck with the placements, but this helps to work as a guide as you start to build your colors as you move through the cup. So get really good coverage up at the top and then just slowly start to blend the green into the lighter blue color that you see there. I know it looks like I have 2 blues on this cup, but that is a teal, and then I move into the darker blue. But for this teal that you're seeing right here, I'm using Bora Bora from Boujie Glitter Boutique. And again, this time I am holding the cup at an angle, however, I am tilting it the other way. And what this allows me to do is to start to cascade this teal into the green that we had already laid down. Again, very lightly tap it, but you can see that it's starting to blend the 2 colors together, and I am just taking my time, barely applying any glitter, even though the shaker was giving me kind of some fits. But I am just tapping the shaker, not shaking it, so that I can really start to lay down this teal onto the cup. Now what I'm going to do is, just like if you were doing just a 2-color ombre, is even though I'm still applying a little bit of glitter, I am going to start to tilt the cup the other way and then start to cascade the glitter down into that darker blue. So we had the tilt towards the top of the cup to blend into the green. Now I am tilting the cup the other way to start to bring that teal into the blue section of the cup. Again, just very lightly tapping the shaker to get a little bit of that glitter to cascade down. But you can see that it is starting to come into that blue area, which is exactly what we want. And typically, if you've watched any of my previous tutorials, I usually do just very limited amount of epoxy. But when I'm doing a 4-color or even just any more than just like a 2-color ombre, I do apply a little extra epoxy to the cup because I want to get perfect blends. Now, there's not really anything as a perfect blend, but I want to make sure that I have enough epoxy on the cup to really go back and forth with the colors several times to blend them throughout so that you aren't left with kind of some blotchy spots that you're not happy with. And this is Sailor's Blue, which I absolutely love. Again, it's from Boujie Glitter Boutique. And I am just following the same steps that I did with the teal. First, tilting it down towards the top of the cup to blend it into that teal section. And then I will come back and just lightly tap it and start to blend it into the bottom purple that we will be using. So you can see there that it's already starting to blend, and you're starting to see kind of how all of those colors will come together. And yes, of course, I did just dump this purple all the way up the side of the cup, but it was okay because it just got into the areas actually that I needed it. But this is Wine from Boujie Glitter Boutique. I absolutely love this purple. And with this, I started with the bottom rim, or just like the butt of the cup, made sure that that was nice and covered. And then I start to tilt the cup down at a 45-degree angle to start to blend that purple into the blue. Again, making sure that you got nice coverage on the bottom of the cup. And I'm sorry that this is done during a Facebook Live, so I'm talking while I'm getting it done. But I also think it shows you that do not be intimidated by a 4-color your ombre. Just take your time. There isn't a exactly perfect process, but make sure that you have enough epoxy when you start the process, and you'll be able to get a nice blend that you're happy with. Now I'm just going in with the blue again to blend it into that purple. And what I'm going to do up the entire cup is just to go back and forth with my colors until I get a nice, just like the perfect fade. And I say perfect in like hypotheses, oh my gosh, parentheses. Oh goodness, it's one of those days, because there is no such thing. But just don't be afraid to go back and forth until you get that nice blend. This teal was giving me a little bit of some fits, so that was the one that I had to go back and forth with quite a bit. But that's why we put a little bit of extra of that epoxy on the cup so that we could get a nice fade, because you can see there, like on that cup there, I do have like a splotchy part of the teal. But just go back and forth and don't be afraid. You're not going to mess it up, and just make sure that you don't have any epoxy soaking in, or not any epoxy, any glitter soaking into the extra epoxy we added to the cup. So if you see like any pooling or any glitter that looks like it's just covered in epoxy, just come over, add some more glitter to the top, so that way you have that nice sparkly surface all over the cup. Because if you do have some pooling of the glitter, you'll be able to see that even if you go into your next layers of epoxy. So make sure that you have a nice sparkly glitter surface, no pooling, and you will be good to go. After I was happy with the ombre, I let this sit for a good 4 hours just to make sure that it was fully dry. You could have gone in after 2 hours, but I spray sealed it twice with Rust-Oleum 2X gloss, just because I like the gloss spray paint because it's a little bit thicker than the matte, and it gave me a nice great seal before my coats of epoxy. I did go in with 2 coats of epoxy, 20 milliliters each, with 4 hours drying time between, and then it was time to start our sanding process. It's flap wheel time. So here I am using a 120 grit flap wheel with my Dremel just to expose a little sliver of stainless steel at the top of my cup so that my next coats of epoxy have something to really adhere to. And this allows for my cups to be super long lasting and just withstand the test of time. I then grab my 120 grit sanding block and just smooth out any maybe ridges that had been created by the flap wheel. And this is just a nice extra step that I think really helps to finish the cup. And then I grabbed my orbital sander to start to sand the rest of the epoxy layers that we had put onto our tumbler. I know I harp on this a lot, but sanding your cups before you go into kind of the middle to final layers of epoxy really, really helps to give you just that perfect finish for your smooth final epoxy layers. So here I'm using my orbital sander with 120 grit sanding paper, and all I'm doing is I'm holding my orbital sander in place and just rocking the cup back and forth to really give a nice smooth surface that knocks down the high parts but doesn't dig out any of the low valleys to create some big crevices that gives you that uneven finish. So start with that on the body of the cup, and then I I move into my sanding blocks just because on this cup the glitter will be showing, so I didn't want to run the chance of the orbital sanding off too much glitter. I washed the cup down with Dawn dish soap, and while that was drying, I mixed up 60 milliliters of a little extra ink epoxy, and I separated them out into 4 of the medicine mixing cups. Granted, the first mixing cup I put 20 milliliters in, and then 10, does that add up to 60? And then evenly distributed, I can't math right now, evenly distributed the rest of the epoxy into the 3 other medicine cups. But I put the gold micas, which all of these are from Unicorn Dust Micas. I will list all of the colors down in the description below, but I put most of the micas and the epoxy into the gold because we will need the most of that because of the surface area we'll be working with. Then I moved into green because that is the next most amount of epoxy we will be using. Mix that up, and then I am also here using my medicine cup holder. This is from Design Lingo. I highly recommend you check it out because if you're like me and knock things over pretty easily, this helps just to keep everything organized so that your popsicle sticks aren't flipping out and getting epoxy everywhere. But then I did grab a blue again from Unicorn Dust Micas, mixed that up and then set that in there, and then finally went for a nice purple, which all of these are, I think, beautiful peacock feather colors that I really like, and you'll see what we do with these next. I cut out my peacock feathers, and the SVG for this is listed for free in the CamiPaige Boutique Facebook page, so definitely go check it out if you'd like to grab this feather. And I cut them out in coordinating vinyl colors. So here, this is gold because that's going to be the main color of our vinyl feathers that we'll be applying to the cup. And what I'm doing is I'm simply taping them down onto a piece of cardstock because you want them on a nice, like, flat surface that you can move around for applying the epoxy that we'll be doing in the next steps. So the gold was the big part of the feathers, the green is another part of the feathers, and same with the blue and purple. But keeping it taped down to the cardstock, I think, really helps to apply the epoxy that you will see in just a minute. So here I'm grabbing the gold, and again, it's nice and mixed up, and it's been thickening while I had cut out the feathers, so it's a nice consistency. But I am just going to put the epoxy with the mica in it and just spread it over the vinyl, kind of like how you would either ice a cookie or I'm trying to think of something else, maybe like spread out peanut butter with your finger, but you would use a knife, so I'm not sure. But you're just going to get a nice even coat of the epoxy and mica powder mixture. And one thing I think is important, because you will see it in the feathers, is you want to make sure that you have the mica as smooth as possible, because you can sometimes see like the fingerprints or like the finger marks or the unevenness with mica pigments or mica powders. So just make sure that you have it nice and evenly coated. You can see here how like all the micas are going the same direction, and it's gonna make your feathers just come out that much better. I cut 6 feathers just to have some extras because I know how I am with vinyl, but for this design I believe I only used 4 or 5, so just cut as many feathers as you think you need for your cup. Then once all the epoxy is applied, just torch it super, super fast. Do not hold your torch in one spot. And then we're just going to move on to the other colors of the vinyl. So this is the green. So just kind of go over the top of it. And these strips were a lot easier to get an even coat on just because they were smaller and not nearly as cumbersome as the gold feathers. So this one a lot faster. So you can see I'm just literally dipping my finger into the epoxy and mica mix and then just sliding it over the vinyl. Once all the epoxy is applied, you are going to want to weed the vinyl as soon as possible. Now, I will tell you that these feathers are not the easiest things to weed. This was kind of a cumbersome process, but you kind of get the hang of it the more you go through it. Just take your time, weed out all the pieces, and then just also move to the tiny strips, and you can see just how easy those come off. And then you're gonna want to set these aside for probably a good 2 to 4 hours. I would say probably more like 4 to 6 hours with a little extra ink epoxy. Make sure that they are good and dry, and then we will apply them to the cup. And also you are going to want to make sure that you get all of the pieces weeded out, because once they're dry, you're not going to be able to get them fixed. After you get everything weeded, if there are little spots that you have any issues with, just grab a little silicone brush, which is what I have here, and you can just go through and either remove any excess epoxy that might have gotten on the outsides of the feathers, like any kind of gloppy places, or if there was any epoxy pulled away from the vinyl, you can just kind of grab any excess and apply it to the missing spots or take off any excess, and it works great for this. And you don't have to worry about ruining a paintbrush with epoxy. So this was just a nice, great tool. This one just comes to a point. There are some that have flat surfaces, but I liked that this was just a nice pointy silicone edge that I could really go in and remove anything that I needed to, or apply any extra from the spots that had been removed. My camera didn't like me, so I did not film putting down the first couple feathers, but here is how I did it for the ones that were remaining. So I just peel off one of the feathers and just place it on the cup. Now I kind of wanted like a cascading, almost spiral to the cup. So you just take off the feather just like you would any other vinyl. You do not want to use transfer tape because it will pull the mica powder and epoxy off. And then if there are any items or any parts of the vinyl that aren't sticking up because you did use the epoxy over the top of it, I use a clear gel super glue. Put it on my X-Acto knife, and this one was almost gone, so it's a little bit of a pain, but you can see I put it on my X-Acto knife, run it underneath the vinyl, and then use the end of my X-Acto knife just to hold it down until it stays in place. So I have the super glue on the end of the blade, run it underneath the vinyl, hold it in place with the end of the X-Acto knife, and then it adheres to the cup wonderfully. I would recommend using a gel super glue instead of just a liquid because it will run all over the place. But then what you want to do is just grab the other parts of your feathers, and this is a little kind of tedious just because you don't have the transfer tape, and you can see there that I pulled the micas and the epoxy right off. But you just want to get the pieces, and this is also why I cut extra, and lay them into the feathers as nicely as possible. There is epoxy, so it's a little bit tougher because when you have transfer tape, you can line everything up. But just kind of massage it into the different regions and build up your different feather pieces, and you will see how pretty they actually come together. So again, just taking the different pieces of the feather, laying them down, and even with these smaller components, if you do need to use a super glue, by all means, don't feel like you don't have to, because this stuff will dry clear under epoxy, so you don't really have to worry about it showing through in case you do get a little extra on your cup. Doing the feathers this way added a really nice 3D element to this cup, but if you didn't like it this way, you could honestly use HTV and get a similar look, just not kind of the oomph that we were going for with the 3D vinyl. I wanted to make sure to seal all of this vinyl really well with a polyacrylic before moving into epoxy, just so that we didn't have anything lifting. I didn't want to go through the process of placing all of these wonderful feathers just to have them lift and then have pokey bits everywhere. So I'm taking polyacrylic and I'm making sure to get really good and a really nice coat over the feathers and into all of those crevices so that you have a nice, good seal before you go into epoxy. Once you get this done, and granted, I did not go around the whole cup. I let this dry for just 2 hours, which is longer than normal, just because I added a little bit more. And since these feathers were 3-dimensional, and then I moved into epoxy. I was working on a couple of cups at this time, so I needed to mix up, I think, about 80 milliliters of epoxy. And I grabbed the brand new CamiPaige boat prop mixers and I mixed it up. Granted, these boat props work in as little as like 30 milliliters of epoxy, but I just love these things because it makes the epoxy so clear. You don't have to scrape the sides because of the design. It pulls all of the epoxy in on itself, so you're getting full mixture from beginning to end, and you can just keep the boat prop in place and it pulls everything together and gives you a almost bubbleless finish to your epoxy so that you can just move in, and it cuts the time in half, and you don't have to like just rigorously like mix it up to get your epoxy in a good spot. So there you go. You can see it is nice and clear. And then I moved in to apply it to my cup. I will link the boat prop mixers in the description below in case you want to check those out. But then this cup needed 2 final coats. The first coat was 20 milliliters of a little extra ink epoxy. I let that dry for about 4 to 6 hours. And then I went into a second coat of 20 milliliters. And then this baby was done. I am so excited for this cup. I can't wait to give it to my sister because she just loves peacocks so much. And I just really like how the simplicity, but yet the elegance really brings all of the elements together. And here she is. I just absolutely love how this cup turned out. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of peacocks, I think the colors and the feathers are wonderful and really bring this design together. I hope this tutorial was helpful and inspires you to create something beautiful. If you have any questions about the steps or information, please feel free to reach out and I will be more than happy to help. As always, thank you for watching. It really means a lot to me. If you like this tutorial, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you can see future videos. You can also ring the bell so you are notified of all future cup making goodies. Thank you again. I love you guys. Bye.